mind seeing it with
Hello and welcome back to the ROI channel, the channel that's obsessed with the art and science of return on investment, as well as some interesting adventures. I'm back for round two with a very, very popular guest. He's the big, bad, BowTieMara, the man who knows everything there is to know about Argentina. We're going to cover real estate today, particularly vineyards in Argentina, very niche business, one in which the BowTieMara himself understands very well. We're going to talk about currency. We're going to talk about the so-called new currency of cryptocurrency exchanges and some of the dangers to watch out for. If you've been watching the news, you'll know there are quite a few of those and much, much more. So I'm excited to see where this conversation will take us. Disclaimer, guys, anything that we say is just our opinion. Two guys talking about investing, crazy stories, and nothing is to be considered advice. With that, I would like to welcome back to the channel our first ever return guest. That is you, Mr. Mara. How are you, sir?
Yeah, doing well here. Thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure.
Pleasure is all mine. So we received some very, very good feedback about your fascinating insights into the land that is Argentina last time. I thought we might pick up kind of where we left off in terms of real estate, because the real estate market and the transaction process in Argentina is really quite specific. I'd love to get your input as to what's happening at the moment in terms of the big cities, which is mainly Buenos Aires, and then what's happening in terms of some of the more regional locations. And your Substack, recently you wrote an article about vineyards, which I'm very, very interested to delve into. Currently, what are we looking at in terms of the capital city, Buenos Aires? Is there a lot of turnover happening there? Where would you suggest people are looking most, or where is the most interest in terms of apartments in the capital? We'll start there and then we'll work our way out.
Yeah, so right now there's not a lot of turnover yet. There's still a lot of people that have had their property on the market for years, and it's mainly, a lot of Argentines have left in the last 2 years, ever since the start of the pandemic, and before that also during the previous government, just because of economic reasons. And most have, or a lot of people have a second passport, or an Italian or a Spanish passport, so they tend to go to Europe. Others go to Miami, and all those people usually, if they are from upper middle class or good middle class, then they will have a property that they need to sell. So there's a lot of those distressed properties on the market and not a whole lot of buyers. So that's also one of the reasons why you can get really good deals if you find one of those properties that somebody really needs the money now. For example, I've seen a couple of ads already that really stress that, I'm leaving the country, I need this money now. So I'm willing to, sell it for less. So usually if you go any published price, you can go 20-30% under, see what they do. And then, if they don't accept it, okay, you'll see. And that's, given the fact that those prices have already dropped at least 25-30% from the peak. So you can get a really big discount right now. I think it's still not done yet because there's just not enough turnover. There are more foreigners scouting here and looking for properties than for example last year, but it's still not the volume that really justifies price increases or in anything. So I think it's still it could still drop a little bit more. Also economically it's not that much better, and I think personally that next year we'll see a big implosion unless the IMF is willing to step in once again, on top of all the immense debt that Argentina already accrued during the last time they gave such a big loan, which was the biggest IMF loan ever to a country, which is $60 billion was lent to Argentina.
And where did that money go? I know this is a bit of a sidetrack, but $60 billion is kind of like the war effort in Ukraine, right? Like that's not a small amount of money. And we're talking before the recent loose monetary policies around the world. So yeah, where has that gone?
Well, it basically just went poof. Now that's the argument of the current government, which is the opposition government of the Macri government. So the previous government that actually took on that loan. It's always like, oh yeah, that money was all spent on frivolous stuff, or it was all just deposited in a big black hole, and only his friends made money on that. But the truth of the matter is that Argentina was so indebted, and they already had they didn't have really access to any capital markets because of old debt that was still not fully restructured because not everybody agreed to the terms. And the previous government finally settled, and that's when Paul Singer made his 16-year bet, basically, and he made an enormous return on that because he bought like the 7% that was still distressed and not agreeing to the terms, and that's why Argentina was technically still in default worldwide and didn't have access to capital. So and that was after 2001. So until 2001, until 2016, more or less, Argentina was just couldn't have access to good loans or capital markets the way other countries can. So then Macri decided we need to settle with these guys, and we'll pay the full amount. And of course, Argentina didn't really have that money, so they needed another loan. And that plus a bunch of local peso loans, basically it all disappeared very quickly. And they did some infrastructure work, but not really, nothing worth mentioning.
Okay, so was the Macri government initially that took on that IMF loan, and then how do you structure a term like that? Like the IMF injects all this capital, and
so
how do they structure that? Is it like new sovereign bonds that are created out of thin air, and they have coupons over yield to maturity and all that sort of stuff? What did that actually look like?
Well, the IMF they don't give dollars, they give SDRs, which are the currency basket of I believe it's yen, euro, dollars, and some yuan as well. That's what they lend out technically to these countries, and then they restructure those payment terms over multiple years, so it crosses over multiple governments, and that's also the risk, of course, because that's when you can get into a situation like the previous government said, like, we're not going to pay these terms, so we're going to default, and we're going to look for a new arrangement. So that was sort of like the fear that this government would do that. They didn't. They restructured with the IMF. The IMF agreed. They are placing more oversight on finances. And basically, for me, what it looks like is that the IMF cannot have this fail, because this would be such a big failure and a slap in the face of the IMF. It would basically underpin that everything they do is not for the betterment of countries, but actually makes every country worse off, which is, I think, in the end, what happens with all these loans. And I'm just saying that because of what they're agreeing upon as, like, okay, Argentina is fulfilling its it's part of the deal. It's very, very loose in the sense that they didn't even do this with Greece, where they were a lot more on the ball in terms of you need to really start tightening your monetary policy and your the amount of people working in the government, etc. Of course, they can't really adjust the monetary policy in Greece because of the euro, but they did have to cut down on government spending a lot, and here it's actually gone up, and the president already confirmed that for next year, or at least until the elections, they're going to spend an amount that's never been seen before. So it's really amazing to me that the IMF is agreeing to, or basically saying that Argentina is fulfilling its part of the deal. And they already gave like 2 extra reimbursements of more loans. Basically, I think there's 2 more, and then afterwards, in 2024, 25, then Argentina needs to start paying back some of the debt. But that's so far away that nobody cares, and everything's just going to go on the way it does.
Okay. Wow, oh my God, my head is spinning already. So that's very
Yeah.
interesting. And elections in Argentina next year, are you expecting that to change anything? And what are they like? What are they selling to the IMF? Are they saying, look, we're going to put this into infrastructure, airports, railroads? It's certainly not going into airports, because I know I've just purchased flights all around Latin America, and anything that has anything to do with Argentina, if you're flying into or out of the country, the airline tickets are like multiples of anywhere else due to the
but
taxes,
that's not
right? Like,
yeah. You buy taxes and you get a ticket for free, basically, because the taxes are literally double the same amount of tax on the ticket. Yeah, so it's really crazy. But that's more like the way it's structured, because they want to punish people that have the money to fly. They need to pay more in terms of taxes than people that can't afford that. So that has always been sort of the case here with a lot of that stuff, that if you're well off, then you're going to have to pay a lot of taxes here. That's just the case. But at the same time, not many people actually do that. So
yeah, shockingly, people that provide value in goods and services to the economy all of a sudden get sick of politicians stealing via taxation, and they find ways around it. So it's very, very interesting. In terms of the real estate market, so we've got a lot of sellers there, not many buyers for obvious reasons, because they're afraid to enter, or certainly foreign investors would be afraid to enter into such an environment. How long are some of these properties on the market for sale? Like you mentioned years. Are we talking like 1 year turnover, 2 years? What are we talking from a vendor's perspective?
Well, if somebody doesn't want to budge on the price, then it can be multiple years. It could be 3-4 years. I've seen some properties here that have been for sale for like 5 years, and then you actually know that the person doesn't need the money that much, and they just want that price, and then they don't really care about the rest. But if you track other properties, then you can see the prices just go down over month over month, and then it's something like, okay, yeah, these people really need the money. And if you show up with a bag of cash and it's like, I can pay for this now, then a lot of people will be willing to accept a 20% discount on the published price.
And what would be a ballpark figure for starting prices as of today? Like you can do it on maybe a square meter base, or let's use the standard 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment in the city. What are we talking from a US dollar perspective to buy one of those bad boys?
So yeah, it really depends on the neighborhood as well, because of course, something in Puerto Madero will be a lot more expensive than some other neighborhoods, or in Palermo. But something in Palermo, a 2-bedroom, would probably be around 130, 150K right now.
Listing price, or what you could buy it for?
No, listing price. I think you can get it for a lot less, but that's sort of like the official price. And just to give you an idea, like I have my Airbnb. It's a studio apartment in Palermo, and I bought it in 2018, just right after the crypto bubble, and I dumped a lot of that money into that property. And I actually bought it in pesos, which was great, which is why I wanted to do it. A lot of these projects, what they do is they build a new building, and then they finance it with, for example, you have to do down payment. I think I paid like 25K as a down payment, and then the rest of the months you pay the rest of the money in pesos. Right now, I'm not in installments that are tied to the construction inflation rate. So that could be like a 7-8% per month, but you're still paying in pesos. So if the devaluation goes faster, your property keeps getting cheaper. So technically, what happened was this, because you do have to pay that within the time that the building is finished. So it's only like a 2-year loan. So it's these are like pretty hefty monthly payments that you need to do.
But you're betting on that devaluation of the
yes,
peso month after
which
month after month. So essentially, your construction costs have depreciated by what, over 2 years?
So I did the calculation, and the property originally, the peso price in dollars, that was about 100K, and I ended up paying around 80K because of this devaluation.
Purely
so
for
that's
the
like
devaluation.
and it was
That's
a new
amazing.
it was a new apartment. So basically, everything was totally brand new. I only had to buy furniture, and then I started to rent it out on Airbnb.
Okay. You got any vacancy in January?
In January, well, it depends on
No,
the
March. I'll
dates,
be there
but
in March. Sorry.
oh, March, yeah, March, definitely.
Good. If you are, expect a discount.
Yeah.
No, that's
Okay.
incredible. And guys, Mara's Substack, he has a fantastic article laying out the process in which he did this and the numbers. It's well worth the read. I can't recommend it highly enough. Links will be in the description as always. Now, talking about real estate, there are a few people that they think to themselves, I might like this idea of getting out of the city, getting into a regional area, perhaps with some land, nice little a house, or maybe a ranch, depending on what the person's into. There's a unique species, not species, but there's a unique amount of people in our species that think to themselves, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to buy a vineyard, and I'm going to have this wonderful rolling mountainous backdrop with grapevines, and I'm going to have my own wine, and I'm going to have all my friends over to show, hey, these are my grapes, and all the rest of it. Now, I grew up on a vineyard. Okay, the reality is not anything like that, guys.
Oh wow! So yeah.
It's slave labor in the Australian 40-degree summer, getting bitten by bees, and if you're lucky, maybe like an ant, if not a spider. But anyway, that's a subject for another day. You have this fascinating article again on Substack talking about vineyards in Argentina. Let's start off. Where are these? In which provinces are these vineyards mainly of interest? Who is looking at them? Are they an investment, or are they more like a display item, shall we say? Can we make the numbers work, or is it more just something you want to do just for the hell of it?
Well, I think it really depends if you want to do a managed vineyard, or if you want to do it yourself.
I am not picking grapes ever again in my lifetime.
Yeah. No, I can imagine that, because it's, I've traveled a lot through Salta and Mendoza, and those are the main provinces. There's also San Juan. I went there as well. That has some big bodegas. But you can see the amount of effort is just insane. If you really get into this industry, you have to work harder than almost anything else, because it's not just picking the grapes. Then afterwards you have the whole maturing process, which is years for some wines. Yeah. Then you need to market it. You need to fight all the export regulations in Argentina, which are a huge pain in the ass, and all the taxation and those taxation basically changes from month to month sometimes, and you really need an expert accountant to be aware of all the new regulations that are occurring all the time, because it just jumps. That's why you have no security as a business owner here, in terms of like what you can face in the forthcoming future. And it can be, in the next couple of months, something can just change, and a regulation will completely screw over your business. So
nothing instills confidence in investors like that kind of environment.
No, and that's why, of course, there's no foreign investment right now, unless it's a company that's heavily in bed with the government. Then you might be able to do something. But as somebody who's interested in vineyards, I would only do it if somebody else manages that whole process for me, because I love the location, I love the vineyards, I love wine. But then at the same time, I just don't see me doing that. It's just too much of a headache. And the return is also really not that great. I mean, that's why a lot of these vineyards are going out of business. A lot of these bodegas are packing up and leaving. And there are a lot of bodegas for sale right now for, it's not that low in terms of the prices. I think they can still go lower. But it's just like they've hit a ceiling where, we can't keep this up. It's costing us more than we're getting in return. So,
yeah. And in terms of, so let's talk size. So is the opportunity there for the real estate itself, I imagine, would be quite valuable. I mean, you've got a bit of land, presumably you've got a building there, and I'm guessing the idea or opportunity could be to turn it into some kind of Airbnb or tourist attraction, such that cash flow from tourists coming in and staying maybe a weekend on your bodega could essentially fund what should be the underlying business, but the underlying business is too tricky to run at a profit. Like, how big is the average bodega? What's the price of it? What do you expect the running costs to be? And give us maybe a typical rundown similar to what you have in this fantastic article that I'll leave in the description.
So yeah, in that article, I don't go into the the general bodega that you would manage yourself, just because that's
that's going to be too hard
so much.
People,
and it depends the acreage and so many things, the types of wine, etc. So I go into more of like this crossover, what you mentioned, like, why don't you turn this into an Airbnb? This is what like a lot of wineries have done, and they've become sort of wine hotels targeting foreigners that want to spend some days in the campo, like next to a vineyard, and they have really good restaurants, and these places really look stunning in terms of design, etc. And they run the vineyard next to that, so basically they're getting a lot of income from that. And then on top of that, some of them also sell part of their vineyards to the foreigners. So basically, gotcha. You can buy that, and they will manage every single aspect for that, and you can label your own wine, and that way you can sort of recoup some of the costs that it takes to maintain that property, because they also have a service cost yearly. And then it's just like a nice little thing where you can label your own wine and say like, hey, I have this vineyard in Mendoza, without actually doing any work for it. So I think that's the most attractive option. And there are quite a few that I mentioned there in that article that offer that.
Let me share my screen, guys, so that you can visual audience can see at least. Can you see my screen there, Mr. Mara?
Yes.
Awesome. So let's start with the turnkey solution. And in here, we're going to talk about price ranges from 50 to 200K, depending on the area. And that includes what? The land, the ownership, and then you've got to pay the management and staff, I presume, for something like that.
Yeah, that would be like a yearly recurring fee or a monthly fee, and this would just be the amount of hectares that you buy with that money.
So that's the purchasing price, and then how much for a typical bodega is the management and running costs, which I presume you're paying in pesos, right?
I'm not really sure if they charge that in dollars or in pesos.
Okay.
I can imagine them setting a fixed fee in dollars, just to make it easier and not to have that devaluating over time.
That's what they would do. And then for local residents in Argentina, up until 2020, you could finance some of the payment. We're not sure what the current situation is around that, but is that what kind of loan to value ratio was available for something like that?
Well, yeah, it's sort of similar then as what I structured with my apartment. And I also did the same thing for some land that I bought in Cafachate in Salta, which is in the city, but it is on a vineyard as well. And it's just like a plot where eventually I could, if I wanted to, build a house or something. But yeah, it's just really nicely located in the valley, and it has that same kind of peso loan structure where the initial dollar amount is just converted to pesos, and then over time it adjusts according to that 7 or 8% per month, in pesos. But it depends. Like some months it's like 5 or 6, and you can always look up the rates because it's the Cámara de Construcción. So the construction what do you call that? Like syndicate,
ministry,
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they set that inflation rate. So, and usually it comes below.
So it's always going to be understated, so it looks better than what it really is. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's usually below the real inflation. So there you even went out on the regular inflation in pesos as well. So
there's a lot to like for a certain degenerate cowboy speculator type that's out there.
Yeah.
So here we go.
That's one of the things that I always mention when people say like, oh yeah, it's so cheap right now in Argentina to buy an apartment or whatever. It's always like, why would you buy? I buy because I live here and I really love it. But if you want to flip houses or something, this is not an ideal market, because you're going to have it on the market for who knows how long, and it's not a given that you will actually get that money out. Plus, if you don't live in Argentina, there's also more taxes as a foreigner. So if you do not have permanent residency, then they have an additional where you need to also show that you haven't rented it out, because if you didn't pay taxes over that Airbnb rent, they're going to charge that into the price, etc. So that's a whole different can of worms, which can be a huge headache as well.
Yeah,
just so people know.
That's a minefield and a half. Okay, look at this. I'm just looking at like lots with vineyards, lots without vineyards, from 3,000 to 5,000 meters squared. I mean, that's really interesting. And visual audience, I'm showing some images of these types of, let's call them hotel vineyards, with amazing backdrop and the opportunity to attract tourist dollars to the area in hard currency, while your expenses are denominated in the softer currency of the peso. So fascinating once again. Let's move on to a different topic, one in which you are also an expert. You're an OG of the crypto space. With recent news with the collapse of FTX, we've seen a lot of negative headlines around crypto in particular. In terms of, let's tie it into the broad umbrella of currency. What's happening in the crypto market in general? How are you positioned? Are you on the camp of, it seems to me there's Bitcoin and then there's the rest of the crypto community. Are you in the camp that says Bitcoin is really the one true and only God of this space, or you're interested in crypto, you just need to be very smart about how you store your tokens? I would like to get your general thoughts, and then we'll narrow down into some of these niches.
So yeah, I guess I'm sort of what you would call a Bitcoin maximalist, in that sense that I do prefer Bitcoin over everything. It doesn't mean I don't invest in other crypto projects just because, number goes up. But yeah, I do think because of the decentralization around Bitcoin, that's one of the most viable projects in case of state attacks. And I'm of the opinion that this will happen, sooner than later. I can already see the EU and the US are now really trying to crack down on crypto, and I think there will be a lot of regulation and around this whole space, just because it's so easy to move money around without oversight. And I think Bitcoin in that scenario is one of the best positioned projects to actually get through all that.
And why is that specifically to Bitcoin? Like, what makes Bitcoin different to some of these other shit coins that we've seen, or Ethereum, for instance, Cardano? I don't even know. I'm not particularly involved in that space, but give us your thesis on what it is that makes Bitcoin particularly attractive and resilient to some of these, let's say, state maneuvers.
So yeah, one of the I think core principles of Bitcoin is the proof of work principle, where you need to mine Bitcoin, and you need to produce a lot of computing power in order to be able to do that. And that's being done in different parts of the world. And as we've seen, for example, when China cracked down on the on miners, there was a huge migration from China to other parts of the world, and basically the network didn't suffer that much. And the ease in which you can just spin up a miner somewhere and use abundant energy that is otherwise discarded is just a very big plus for Bitcoin. And it also means that there's no central party really controlling it, which is the case with a lot of proof of stake coins, which is basically there it matters, how much you have of a certain currency. So in terms of Ethereum, where you need at least 32 Ethereum to be able to run a node, which is a node is basically checking if the transactions on the network are valid or not. So nodes do that, and that also works in Bitcoin. So miners don't actually, they can reject transactions, but the nodes actually check if they are valid or not, and if the whole chain is working the way it should be.
So how many Bitcoin would you need to make a node in that case? 32
yeah,
coins.
zero. So okay. So for Bitcoin, it's really just checking the ledger the whole time, and to run a node, you really don't need to. You can do that on a Raspberry Pi, and you don't really need any energy for that. But the interesting thing there is that through a node, you can also set up your own wallet there, and then you are really 100% in control over who you send money to and who you don't, because that's also an important part of Bitcoin, that nobody can really stop a transaction from happening, which is why it's so powerful. So even if you have all the regulations in the world, I could still send you 1 Bitcoin if I wanted to, and nobody can do anything about it.
Can they being governments, really state entities, can they go after that by attacking wallets? So we're off the exchange now. You've got a privately held wallet with your Bitcoin. What happens to the wallet? Like how do you ensure the ongoing viability of that particular wallet? Presumably that's a company, right? Like I don't know, Coinspace or something like that.
You have a couple like Exodus, Coinomi. There's like a gazillion wallets out there. But the nice thing of these wallets is that they all use the same standardized encryption, where you have your 12 seed phrase word. And even if my computer would burn down or whatever, and I still have that key phrase, then I can just download another wallet and just put that in, and I recover my wallet on any other device. So that's, you could have it, you can have your Bitcoin stored in your brain. If you only remember those 12 words, then you can always open it up and afterwards send money to somebody else.
Okay. So that's very interesting. And in terms of, so you're a Bitcoin maximalist for those.
Yeah, I do have Monero though. And I sort of see that not as so much as a store of value, but like as the Cueva money of the future. Because Monero, I think, is it's also a little bit started out a little bit like Bitcoin, where the original creators, it's actually a Bitcoin fork, and then the original creators left, and nobody really knows who made it, etc. And the plus side of that is that it's completely anonymous, because Bitcoin is pseudonymous, where you can always see how much a wallet has in terms of how many Bitcoins there are in a wallet. You can track all the transactions on the ledger, which is also what makes it so, via the blockchain, which is what makes it so powerful as an accounting tool. But it also makes it so that every single transaction you ever do, if in that whole chain of transactions you KYC'd somewhere, they will find out who you are. And they know, and that's why Bitcoin is terrible for anonymous transaction. If you really want to do illegal stuff, nobody uses Bitcoin for that. Like, that's why the whole dark web is Monero based now, because in Monero you can send whatever amount to somebody else. You can't see that on the blockchain. You cannot see how much somebody has in a Monero wallet. And the powerful thing is that Monero also didn't switch to ASIC mining, and ASIC mining in Bitcoin basically requires you to buy very specific machines to be able to mine Bitcoin. And that's, for me, I think it's a point of attack, because if suddenly these companies that create these machines are told by the government you cannot do this anymore, then that would be a serious problem for the hash rate. And with Monero, you can run it on a car radio or a mobile phone or any computer, and you can still mine it. So that's why I think it's like really powerful, because they basically cannot stop this.
Okay, but does that come at the cost of unlimited supply of Monero?
No, so it
Nope.
also has a hard cap of 21 million like Bitcoin, but it has tail emission. So it does have a built-in inflation rate where it does go up by, I think, around 2% or something.
Okay, so in line with expected
yeah,
population growth, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
But I don't really see that so much as a store of value, because that can fluctuate and whatever. And I think it actually will probably go down because more and more exchanges are taking it off their exchange because the governments are telling them to. But I see it more as like, at least I will have some cash in a CBDC world where every single thing is checked. This is not checkable. So it's just nice to have like a little bit of black market money for whatever, you never know.
just personal privacy reasons. And that's, so you there have challenged one of my underlying assumptions, which I looked at Bitcoin from a position of ignorance, really, of saying, well, okay, Bitcoin will always have a place mainly, and if not only, for nefarious actors that want to use it to do, let's say, off balance sheet transactions that they don't want people to know about. But you're saying, well, Bitcoin is not the best medium in which to do that because of the blockchain, and it may be anonymous in terms of a wallet holder. It doesn't have your name and address on there necessarily, but it's got a specific number or identification tag. And so, in fact, it's not as anonymous as what you think. No. So then when it comes to Monero, it is highly anonymous. The question I have then is, well, how do people keep track of transactions using Monero? Or it doesn't matter, like once you make a transaction, it's kind of...
well, the only thing that gets tracked on the blockchain of Monero is like the amount of transactions, but not the numbers or what's being sent and like how much. All the amounts are hidden and nobody can see that, basically. So yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, and this is like also the reason, for example, for Bitcoin, whenever you there are like coin joins and things you can do to sort of anonymize your Bitcoin more. So let's assume that I bought some Bitcoin on Kraken and then I send it to a coin join. So it's sort of, it washes away my KYC info and then it ends up in another wallet that I own. Now, if I want to send that Bitcoin back to an exchange, a lot of exchanges will refuse to accept that with that deposit because it's been coin joined. So that's why you already have tainted Bitcoin in that sense, because everything is out in the open and you can actually always trace where it comes from. And if they see, okay, it went through a mixer or anything, then we don't want anything to do with it because it's probably,
it's not KYC
activity.
compliant and
exactly.
all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So Monero, never heard of it. I always learn something new when I speak with you. How do you get your hand on this thing? Like, again, I'm not particularly interested in buying it. I don't have any crypto, but it's fascinating from an intellectual perspective. Like, you've got this Monero, it's completely anonymous. Presumably you're going to have some normal people just wanting some privacy in their transactions. Like, I'm all for that. And then you're going to have your bad actors involved. What happens if there's a dispute between bad actor A, who does something illegal and receives payment from bad actor B, who pays them in Monero, and there's a dispute and it's all anonymous and you can't trace it? Do they just like duke it out?
Yeah, that's the thing with any blockchain is basically once you hit send, there's nothing else you can do about it.
Oh my God.
So it's not like with hey, let's call the support center of my bank and try to get my money back. That just doesn't exist. I mean, I've seen so many things. Like, for example, with Ethereum, they have a lot of smart contracts, is what it's called when you interact with the protocol. And for example, you can buy a certain token on Ethereum. And what happens sometimes, if people don't really know what they're doing, they send Ethereum to a certain token contract, which it works, it will let you, and that Ethereum is gone forever because that basically does nothing. But it's the same structure of the address as like a normal address. And there's actually bots on Twitter saying like, so many Ether just sent to this contract, gone forever. So they didn't get anything in return. It's just gone. So that's why,
so apparently there is a lot of trust among thieves and bad actors.
Yeah. No, it's a lot of crazy stuff that can happen.
That's I'm
Definitely.
just in my mind, I'm thinking, like, hey bro, those nuclear warheads I sent you? I haven't received my Monero. And the guy just says, I pressed it, or they say, yeah, not really interested in paying you now.
Yeah,
Or I paid you in Monero, there's a dispute. Oh, sorry, I sent it to the wrong wallet. My bad.
yeah. Well, you have
There's no recourse.
for Bitcoin, for example, there are some services. I've never used them, but I know they exist. That you can have some sort of escrow where both parties
Makes
need to
sense.
sign
Yeah.
like they're okay for the transaction, and then it goes through.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then again, I guess you got a record of a transaction, so you come back to this constant trade-off between anonymity and then accounting. Now, coming to the top of the hour, so I want to spend maybe another 10 minutes. You mentioned the word cueva. It's a fascinating thing that I've been thinking about recently. This is purely from a hypothetical intellectual exercise perspective. In a country that has capital controls, and such as Argentina, we'll just use that as an example, hypothetically. How does one who has access to foreign capital that thinks to themselves, well, this is an interesting idea. I can bring in foreign capital. I can be involved in changing on the black market or the blue dollar rate, to use the Argentine example, and take a very nice commission. I've got essentially a captive audience of people that want out of their local currency, foreigners bringing in local currency, and there's the need to exchange at a rate that's much better than the official rate, because the government obviously is like 60% of the real rate. You can only bring in what, $10,000 US legally into Argentina? Is that correct? Something like that?
Yeah, if you travel and you have it on you, yes, then the max would be $10,000. But there's still like a lot of ways. And actually, I would recommend anybody interested in buying property over like 100K to just do it via bank transfer. Usually people have a US bank account, so you can just do it completely outside of the country, and it will still be a legal transaction. Or you could, like this friend of mine, he recently bought a home in Salta, also for around 150, and you can send that money to an exchange broker, basically, and they will make sure that, of course, for a fee. And these fees fluctuate a lot. So he was able to get like I think a 4%, but like 2 days after it was 6.5%, because it depends on how many dollars are the demand for dollars into the country and out of the country. So that really can fluctuate a lot. And what they do basically is they, through Argentine stocks in the US, they just buy and sell those, and that way they bring money into the country through those dollars, basically. And those also have a differential rate. So and it's called the contado con liqui, and that's another rate which is even higher than the blue, if you want to pacify it. But most people just want to have the dollars in there, so they will just transfer those dollars to a brokerage account, and the brokerage will make sure that the dollars will actually arrive here in Argentina.
Okay, so you're essentially doing all wireless transactions to two accounts that can be outside the country. I suppose then you organize the paperwork locally for the transfer of ownership of the property, and then
that always goes with the notary. So if you both parties need to be there, buyer and seller, the notary has everything documented, and it basically just states that you've sent that money, and then the deed is signed.
Okay, and then when it comes to withdrawing cash inside the country, you will probably be fleeced, I imagine, going to your local Western Union and saying, can I withdraw this 100K's worth of
well
US?
Yeah, if you do through Western Union, I don't think you can even do that kind of amount through Western Union, but it works the same way. So it would be a local brokerage sending over that money to the US, buying Argentina stocks, and then making sure
when you
that
say
money's there.
stocks, what exactly do you mean?
So that's ADRs. So basically Argentine stocks that are listed on the New York Stock Exchange.
As American Depository Receipts is the ADR,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
It's also convoluted. I love it, but it's very complicated.
It's very, very complicated. And I'm actually looking to buy in Mar del Plata next year. So I'm gradually, just making sure that I have enough cash to be able to do that. So I'm actually doing it in smaller amounts every single month, and then because you can also just arrive with a suitcase full of money and saying, okay, I want to buy this property, and that's all fine.
You just have to get the cash into the suitcase, into the country, and
yes,
yeah,
that's the hard part. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Snake. In terms of last question, in terms of the overall bolsa, the Argentine stock market, appears to be a bit of activity recently, particularly moving into the likes of EPF, which I guess is your main well-known stock.
That's the Petrobras of Argentina, basically. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to the overall value of the bolsa, I am looking up EPF so I can talk you through what I'm seeing. What is the market cap of the entire bolsa?
It's nothing. It really evaporated because it's all priced in pesos as well. So there you have like a double kind of risk if you go into the local currency system. So even if some of these did 100%, it doesn't really mean that you actually got 100% in dollars.
Right.
It's usually a lot less. But the total market cap is a laugh. I'm not sure the last time I looked, but it was almost nothing. It was like one company of the New York Stock Exchange or something.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I'm going to share my screen now. So I'm bringing up the EPF. Okay, 90% rise in the price over the last year, as we can see here. Okay, we've got a market cap quoted in pesos, so I have no idea what that is in dollars. What is that divided by 3? I don't even know. Let's see.
If you can divide that through by 300, and then you sort of have your
let's
dollar.
call it what, 300 million?
That
300 million.
Yeah, 300 million.
300 million. For the
That's
biggest,
like even less than some shit coins.
Yeah, exactly. That's crazy. And ownership. So recently we've got here Mellon Investment Corp taking basically a 40% stake. They've just been and this is talking to my Spanish professor actually, who just continues to hound me with questions about the stock market, and he noticed a lot of volume going through, and I said, well, give me a second, I'll pull up the charts and see what's going on. And that is not normal, right? Like a Mellon investment.
No, that is very, very likely that this is to do with getting money in and out of the country through that stock, because technically, if you know the backstory of EPF, it's really not wise to invest in that right now because they basically nationalized it without the shareholders' consent, and they're in for like huge fines because of that. So that's why it also tanked on the New York Stock Exchange. But it's and everybody keeps saying, yeah, but it's so historically low and there's value in the company, which is true, but it still has that sort of Damocles like hanging over its head.
So how would EPF compare to Petrobras? Petrobras is very topical. I'm going to make another video about it recently. People are really scared about Lula. Just seems to me to be different, like completely different levels of risk.
It is. I would say Lula is more of like at least his previous two governments. That's actually during the time that I moved to South America, and I would say he's pretty mild center left. I wouldn't actually call, but he seems to have come back with a vengeance. I'm not sure what he's going to do this time. It seems like he's a lot more vindictive. Of course, he's been prosecuted, etc. Like everybody's out trying to get him, which was true. I'm not sure like how much. I'm pretty sure like he was actually involved in most of that stuff, but I'm not sure what he's going to do now. But Petrobras has always been in the government's hands, and one of the differences between Lula and Bolsonaro for sure is that you could have like a really big spike with another Bolsonaro government because he was planning on privatizing it more. So that's not going to happen. That's 100% sure not going to happen with Lula. And I'm not sure if it will probably stay the way it is because Bolsonaro had plans to privatize it more. and Lula will definitely not do that. But he also will not nationalize it or whatever. He will just, keep the state stake the same as it was.
Yeah, and they own over 50%, and I presume it's a similar deal with EPF, where it's majority government owned. Just seems to me like in Brazil, Lula is more hamstrung by, they at least have a functioning democracy of sorts, where you've got the House and you've got the Senate that keeps some kind of check over what the reigning government can and can't do, whether they just want, they can't decide to privatize it with the stroke of a pen. But there seems to be a lack of confidence in sentiment. So it'll be very interesting to see. Melon Investments, maybe the subject of your next Substack. And we've got the exchange rate up here, guys. So according to what I've copied and pasted, like 5.6 million, like that's
no, but there you have the official rate, right? So here, this will be, you have to, it's probably 80% less.
Silly me, I forgot.
Yeah,
I forgot to account for the.
I have so many of these interactions on Twitter where it's like, no, but that's actually, it's way more than that. It's like, no, guy, this is the official rate.
That's still time. Even if you take the official rate, like for the biggest publicly traded corporation in the nation, like the nation the size of Argentina, that's peanuts. It's ridiculous.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Well, thank you so much again for this. Always a fascinating discussion. We'd love to catch up with you down the track and see what's happening. Listeners and viewers, if you haven't subscribed to Mara's Substack, you absolutely must. It's just a fascinating adventure every time the article hits my inbox. Is there anything I've missed, or is there anything you want to add before we wrap up this round 2 discussion?
No, I think we went over everything that we planned on discussing. So yeah,
and then some. No, I really enjoy it. Well, thank you so much, my friend. Look forward to catching up with you in the future, guys. Mara's details, Twitter, Substack, all the rest of it will be in the description. Make sure you go on and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch up with you in the next episode of the ROI podcast. Take care, everybody.